I am sitting in the waiting room of our local television station right now, and my phone will not stop buzzing. Mom, Dad, Ethan, their names keep flashing across my screen like warnings I have learned to ignore. 5 years ago, these same people told me I would never amount to anything. They said I was wasting my time chasing dreams that would lead nowhere. Today, this entire city is about to hear my story. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if you have not already. But before we get to that moment under the studio lights, let me take you back to where it all started. Back to the house where I learned that love could be conditional and that blood does not always mean family. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and families go back generations. My parents were what most people would call comfortable. Dad worked as an accountant for a local firm, steady job, decent salary. Mom was a nurse at the county hospital, always busy, always tired. We lived in a 2-story house with a backyard and a white fence, the American dream on the surface. When I was 3 years old, my little brother Ethan came into the world. I remember standing on my tiptoes, trying to see him through the hospital nursery window while Grandma Rose held my hand. What I did not understand then was that Ethan was not just another baby to my parents. Before him, Mom had suffered a miscarriage that nearly broke her. So when Ethan arrived healthy and screaming, they called him their miracle baby. From that moment on, everything changed. My earliest memories are filled with small moments that did not make sense to a child, but cut deep nonetheless. Every family photo we took Ethan was positioned in the center, usually in Dad's arms or on Mom's lap. I was always on the edge of the frame, sometimes half cut off like an afterthought. Birthday parties were elaborate affairs for Ethan with themes and decorations, and all the kids from the neighborhood. Mine were quieter, smaller, often combined with other events because it was more convenient. Grandma Rose was the only one who seemed to notice. She would pull me aside during family gatherings and slip me an extra piece of pie. She would call me on my birthday right at midnight before anyone else remembered. She was my safe harbor in a house where I felt like a guest. As we got older, the differences in how my parents treated us became impossible to ignore. Ethan discovered football in middle school, and suddenly Dad had a new best friend. Every weekend, they would be out in the yard throwing the ball, or Dad would drive him to practice and stay to watch. He bought Ethan the best equipment, signed him up for elite training camps, talked about him to coworkers like he was raising the next professional athlete. I had different interests. I loved art and technology. I would spend hours drawing or taking apart old electronics just to see how they worked. When I discovered computer programming in 8th grade, it felt like finding a secret language that only I could speak. But every time I tried to show Dad something I had created, his eyes would glaze over. "That is great, buddy," he would say, already looking past me. "But have you seen Ethan's stats from last week's game?" When Ethan won a regional football award in 9th grade, my parents threw him a party. They invited family, friends, neighbors. There was a cake with his jersey number on it. Speeches were made. I stood in the corner, clapping along with everyone else, trying to feel happy for my brother instead of invisible. That same year, I won first place in a countywide poster design competition. My art teacher submitted my work without telling me, and I found out I had won when she called me to her classroom after school. The award ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon at the community center. My parents did not come. Mom had a shift she could not miss. Dad was taking Ethan to an out-of-town scrimmage. They said they were proud when I told them about it, but the words felt hollow, like reading from a script they did not believe. I took the bus to the ceremony alone. I walked up to receive my certificate while strangers clapped politely. Afterward, I sat on a bench outside and held that piece of paper in my hands, wondering why it did not feel like a victory. When I got home, nobody asked about it. The certificate sat on my desk for weeks before I finally put it in a drawer. That night, Grandma Rose called. She had seen the announcement in the local paper and tracked down someone from the community center to get the details. She told me she had cut out the article and put it on her refrigerator. She said she wished she could have been there, but her doctor had told her not to drive anymore. I could hear the pride in her voice, genuine and warm, and I held on to that feeling like a lifeline. The moment that truly opened my eyes came when I was 16. I had been teaching myself to code using free online resources and library books. I was getting good enough that I wanted to take it seriously. But our family computer was ancient and constantly crashing. I needed something reliable if I was going to keep learning. I asked Dad if he could help me buy a used laptop. I had researched options and found one for about $200 that would be perfect. I showed him the listing, explained why I needed it, talked about maybe studying computer science in college. He barely looked at the screen before shaking his head. "We are not wasting money on your hobbies, Lauren. When you can show me, this will actually lead somewhere we can talk." I wanted to argue, but I knew it would not change anything. 2 weeks later, Ethan got new football cleats. Top of the line, $300, because his coach said the right equipment could improve his performance. Dad drove him to the sporting goods store like it was Christmas morning. I did not say a word. Instead, I got a job at a pizza place downtown. I worked every shift they would give me, weekends, evenings, even some school nights when I could manage it. The smell of grease and dough followed me everywhere. My grades slipped a little because I was exhausted all the time. But by the end of summer, I had saved enough. I bought that laptop with my own money, carried it home like a trophy I had earned in a war nobody else knew I was fighting. When Mom saw it, she did not congratulate me or ask how I had managed to afford it. "I hope this does not distract you from helping around the house," she said. That was it. No acknowledgement of the sacrifice, the work, the determination. Just a reminder that my dreams were inconvenient to them. I set up that laptop in my room and taught myself more in the next 2 years than most people learn in 4 years of college. I built websites for local businesses to make extra money. I created small programs that solved problems nobody had asked me to solve. And every night before I went to sleep, I would look at that laptop and remind myself of something important. In this family, I had to be my own champion. Nobody else was going to do it for me. High school graduation arrived, and with it, a moment that should have been a celebration. I had worked hard despite everything, kept my grades up while holding down a job and teaching myself skills my school did not even offer. I got accepted to a state university with a partial scholarship enough to make college possible if I kept working. The ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon in June. I had invited my parents weeks in advance, reminded them multiple times, even wrote the date on the kitchen calendar myself. They did not come. Ethan had a football showcase that same day, some recruiting event 2 hours away. Both of my parents went with him. They said they were sorry that they would make it up to me, that they knew I would understand. I walked across that stage and received my diploma while Grandma Rose watched from the audience, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She was the only family member present. Afterward, she took me to dinner at my favorite restaurant and gave me a card with $50 inside. "You are going to do incredible things," she told me, holding my hands across the table. I have always known it, even when others could not see it. A month later, I packed my car alone and drove myself to college. There was no family caravan, no tearful goodbyes at the dorm room door, no parents helping me set up my new life. I hauled my boxes up 3 flights of stairs by myself and hung Grandma Rose's card on my wall as a reminder that someone believed in me. 2 years later, when Ethan started college, I saw the photos on Facebook. The whole family had driven 7 hours to take him. There were pictures of them unloading his stuff, decorating his room, taking him out for a fancy dinner. Mom posted a long caption about how proud they were of their son, how he was going to do amazing things. I was not mentioned. I was not invited. I found out about the trip the same way strangers did, through social media. I called home that week wanting to hear some explanation, maybe hoping I was wrong about what I had seen. Mom answered, but she was distracted, talking fast. "Sorry, honey, I cannot really chat. We are helping Ethan settle in and there is so much to do. Talk soon, okay?" She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my tiny apartment that night, staring at my phone, finally admitting to myself what I had always known. I was not their priority. I never had been. And no amount of hoping would change that. Grandma Rose called me that same week. She had seen the photos too. "I am sorry, sweetheart," she said softly. "You deserved better than this." She sent me a package a few days later. Inside was a small check for $50 and a letter telling me how proud she was of everything I was accomplishing. She wrote that she wished things were different with my parents, but that she wanted me to know I was loved, truly loved by at least one person in this family. I kept that letter in my desk drawer, pulling it out whenever the loneliness felt too heavy. When I was 22, I got a phone call that changed everything. Grandma Rose had suffered a heart attack. By the time I made it to the hospital, she was gone. The funeral was held 3 days later at the church where she had been baptized 80 years before. I took time off from my part-time job and drove 4 hours to be there. I arrived at the church early, expecting to sit with my family to grieve together despite everything. Instead, I walked in to find the seating had already been arranged. Mom, Dad, and Ethan sat in the front row with the immediate family. I was directed to a row near the back, seated next to distant cousins I barely recognized. I sat through the service feeling like a stranger at my own grandmother's funeral. When they asked family members to share memories, Ethan stood up and told a story about how Grandma Rose used to come to his football games. Everyone laughed and cried at his words. Nobody asked me to speak. After the burial, we gathered at my parents' house for the reading of the will. This was when the last mask fell away. Grandma Rose had left me her antique necklace, a family heirloom that had belonged to her mother, along with $15,000 from her savings. Ethan received $1,000 and a brief note wishing him well. The silence in the room after the lawyer finished reading was suffocating. Mom was the first to speak. Her face was red, her voice shaking with anger. "This is ridiculous." Rose clearly was not in her right mind. Lauren must have manipulated her somehow. I could not believe what I was hearing. My grandmother had just died, her body barely cold in the ground, and my mother was accusing me of taking advantage of her. I did not manipulate anyone, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Grandma Rose made her own choices. Dad jumped in, his tone cold and dismissive. "You always knew how to play the victim, Lauren, always making yourself look like the forgotten one so people would feel sorry for you." The words hit me like physical blows. 22 years of being overlooked, dismissed, and pushed aside, and now I was being painted as the manipulator, the villain. Ethan sat quietly, not defending me, not saying anything at all. His silence hurt almost as much as my parents' accusations. I left that house with Grandma Rose's necklace clutched in my hand and tears streaming down my face. I did not say goodbye. I got in my car and drove away from that place, from those people who shared my blood, but had never shared their hearts. That night, alone in my apartment, I made a decision. I was done waiting for my family to love me the way I deserved. I was done hoping things would change. From that moment forward, I would build my own life, my own success, my own happiness, and I would do it without them. The $15,000 from Grandma Rose became my seed money. I had been developing an idea for months, an app designed to help visually impaired people identify colors through audio descriptions. I had met a blind woman at a coffee shop who mentioned how difficult it was to pick out clothes because she could not tell what color they were. The idea had been growing in my mind ever since. With Grandma Rose's gift and my own savings, I threw myself into development. I worked my day job, then came home and coded until 2 or 3 in the morning. I watched tutorial after tutorial, solved problem after problem, refused to give up even when the obstacles seemed impossible. My friend Marcus, a co-worker who had become like a brother to me, was my biggest supporter. He tested early versions of the app, gave me honest feedback, encouraged me when I wanted to quit. "This is going to help people," he would tell me. "Keep going." 5 years passed. 5 years of silence from my family. No calls on my birthday. No messages at Christmas. Just one text from Mom during my first year of going. No contact, a brief hope you are doing well with no follow-up when I did not respond. I learned to live without them. It was not easy. Some nights the loneliness crept in like fog, making it hard to see anything clearly. But I kept working, kept building, kept believing that Grandma Rose's faith in me was not misplaced. And finally, my persistence started to pay off. The breakthrough came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I received an email from a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping people with visual impairments. They had discovered my app through an online forum where users were sharing their experiences. "We believe your application has significant potential," the email read. "We would like to discuss partnership opportunities." My hands were shaking as I typed my response. Within 2 weeks, I was meeting with Diana, the CEO of a tech startup that specialized in accessibility solutions. She was sharp-driven and genuinely passionate about creating technology that made a difference in people's lives. "Your app is exactly what the community needs," she told me across a conference table, "but it needs investment and expertise to reach its full potential. I want to bring you on as co-founder of a new division focused entirely on this project." I could barely process what was happening. Years of struggle of being told my interests were a waste of time of working alone in the dark while my family celebrated my brother's every achievement. And now someone was offering me a real opportunity. I said yes. The next 6 months were a whirlwind. We refined the app, expanded its features, made it available for free to anyone who needed it. The response was overwhelming. People wrote to us sharing stories of how the app had changed their daily lives. A mother who was blind could now pick out her daughter's school clothes without help. An elderly man could finally sort his medication by color. Each story felt like proof that all those lonely nights had been worth it. Then the local newspaper picked up the story. A journalist reached out wanting to interview me about my journey. I was nervous, unaccustomed to attention, but Marcus convinced me it could help spread the word about the app to people who needed it. The article ran on a Sunday morning. "Local man creates app that changes lives for the visually impaired," the headline read. There was a photo of me holding my phone with the app open. The article mentioned my grandmother's belief in me, her gift that helped fund the project, the necklace I still wore every day. I read that article sitting in my apartment, tears rolling down my cheeks. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Not by my family, but by the world. The article spread faster than I could have imagined. People shared it on social media, tagged friends who might benefit from the app, wrote comments about their own experiences with family members who were visually impaired. Within days, I was getting messages from people all over the country. Then the television station called. They wanted me to come in for a live interview on the morning show. The producer said my story was inspiring, that viewers would want to hear about the person behind the app. I hesitated at first. Part of me still felt like that kid standing alone at his poster design ceremony, wondering if anyone cared. Marcus did not let me say no. "This is your moment," he said firmly. "You earned it. Every late night, every sacrifice, every time you kept going when nobody believed in you. This is what it was all for." The night before the interview, I lay in bed holding Grandma Rose's necklace. I pressed the cool metal against my lips and whispered into the darkness, "I wish you could see this, Grandma. I hope I am making you proud." The morning of the interview, I woke up before my alarm. I put on my best shirt, a crisp white button-down that Marcus had helped me pick out. I clasped Grandma Rose's necklace around my neck, feeling her presence close to my heart. Then I drove to the television station with my hands steady on the wheel and my heart full of something I had not felt in years. Hope. I was sitting in the green room going over my notes one last time when my phone started buzzing. A text from a distant cousin I had not spoken to in years. "Your mom just saw the promo for your interview. She is calling everyone asking what is going on." Then a missed call from Mom. Then a missed call from Dad. Then a text from Ethan. "Bro, why did I have to find out about this from TV? Call me." I stared at my phone, watching the notifications pile up. 5 years of silence. 5 years of not a single call on my birthday, not a single message asking how I was doing. And now suddenly they cared. Another text from Mom. "We need to talk. This is embarrassing. Why did you not tell us?" Embarrassing. Not proud, not excited, embarrassing. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. They were not reaching out because they had finally realized they had been wrong about me. They were reaching out because they were afraid of what the neighbors might think. They were worried about looking like bad parents on local television. This was not about me. It had never been about me. I silenced my phone and put it in my pocket. A production assistant appeared at the door. "We are ready for you, Mr. Lauren." I stood up, straightened my shirt, touched my grandmother's necklace one last time. Then I walked toward the studio lights. The interview itself passed in a blur of bright lights and friendly questions. The host asked about my childhood, my inspiration, the technical challenges of building the app. I talked about growing up loving art and technology, about teaching myself to code, about the blind woman at the coffee shop whose simple frustration had sparked an idea. Then the host leaned forward with genuine curiosity in her eyes. "Who inspired you the most on this journey?" I thought about all the possible answers. I thought about the expected answer, the one where I thanked my parents for supporting me, for believing in my dreams. But I could not tell that lie. Not today. Not ever. "My grandmother," I said, my voice steady, despite the emotion building in my chest. Her name was Rose. She taught me that being overlooked does not mean being worthless. When nobody else believed in me, she did. She saw me when no one else could. This necklace I am wearing was hers. She left it to me when she passed along with the money that helped me start this project. Everything I have accomplished I owe to her. I did not mention my parents. I did not mention my brother. That was my answer to 5 years of silence. The host smiled warmly and thanked me for sharing my story. The studio audience applauded. When the cameras stopped rolling, the host shook my hand and told me my grandmother would be proud. I walked out of that studio feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight I had been carrying, the constant need for my family's approval, the hope that someday they would see my worth. I had finally set it down. I did not need their validation anymore. I had found my own. The aftermath of the interview was immediate and intense. My phone, which I had silenced during the broadcast, showed dozens of missed calls and messages when I finally checked it. Mom had left a voicemail. Her voice shifted between anger and tears throughout the recording. "How could you do this to us, Lauren? Everyone we know watches that show. They are all calling now, asking why you thanked your grandmother but did not mention us. Do you have any idea how that makes us look? Not how it made me feel, how it made them look." Dad sent an email which surprised me since he rarely used technology for anything personal. It was long and formal, accusing me of disrespect and ingratitude. He wrote that he and Mom had sacrificed so much to give me a good childhood, and this was how I repaid them. He demanded an apology. Ethan's messages were different, confused rather than angry. "I do not understand why you are acting like this. We are still your family. Can we just talk?" I read everything that night, sitting alone in my apartment with the television muted and the necklace still around my neck. Part of me wanted to respond immediately, to defend myself, to list every moment they had overlooked me and explain why I owed them nothing. But I had learned something important over the past 5 years. Reacting in anger only gave them more power over my emotions. Marcus stopped by with pizza and sat with me while I processed everything. "Are you okay?" he asked. I thought about it honestly before answering. For the first time in years, I actually feel okay. That night, I did something I had needed to do for a long time. I sat down at my computer and wrote a letter to my family. I wrote about the poster competition they missed and the graduation they skipped. I wrote about the laptop I bought with my own money and the dismissal I received in return. I wrote about Grandma Rose's funeral, about being seated with strangers at my own grandmother's service, about being accused of manipulation while still grieving. I wrote until my eyes burned and my fingers ached. I poured 28 years of pain onto those pages. Then I saved the document and closed my laptop. I was not ready to send it. Maybe I never would be. But the act of writing it, of finally putting words to everything I had carried alone for so long, that was healing in itself. The weeks that followed brought unexpected blessings. The app continued to grow. We received funding from a foundation dedicated to supporting people with disabilities. I was invited to speak at a conference about accessible technology. Every day brought new messages from users thanking us for making their lives a little easier. I also started seeing a therapist, something I had put off for years because I thought I should be strong enough to handle things on my own. But strength is not about suffering in silence. It is about having the courage to ask for help when you need it. My therapist helped me understand patterns I had never recognized, the way I constantly sought approval because I had never received it from the people who mattered most, the way I minimized my own achievements because I had been trained to believe they were not important, the way I carried guilt for things that were never my fault. "You do not need their permission to be proud of yourself," she told me during one session. "Your worth is not determined by whether they can see it." Those words became a mantra I repeated to myself whenever the old doubts crept in. I also started building what my therapist called a chosen family. Marcus had been part of that family for years, but now I consciously invested in other relationships too. Diana became a mentor and friend. I joined a community group for people in tech and found others who understood the loneliness of being different. Slowly, I surrounded myself with people who celebrated my victories and supported me through failures. One evening, I drove to the cemetery where Grandma Rose was buried. I had not been there since the funeral, partly because of the painful memories, and partly because I had been too busy surviving to stop and grieve. I sat beside her headstone as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I did it, Grandma," I said softly. The app is helping people with real lives, and I was on television. Can you believe it? Your quiet little grandson who used to hide in his room with his computer? I told her about the interview about touching her necklace before walking into the studio, about the way saying her name on live television had felt like a small act of justice. I told her about my parents' reaction too, about the voicemails and the emails and the accusations, about how even now, even after everything, they could only think about themselves. "I wish you were here," I admitted, my voice breaking. "You always knew what to say." The wind rustled through the trees, and I chose to believe it was her answer. Before I left, I made her a promise. I am going to keep going. I am going to keep building things that help people. And I am going to remember what you taught me, that being overlooked does not mean being worthless, that love does not have to come from blood to be real. A month after the interview, I finally decided what to do about my family. I composed a short email and sent it to all three of them. "I am open to rebuilding our relationship, but only if you are willing to acknowledge what happened and treat me as an equal. I am not asking for apologies. I am asking for respect. If you are ready for that conversation, I am here. If not, I understand and I wish you well." Mom responded 2 days later. Her email was defensive, filled with justifications and explanations that explained nothing. She said I was exaggerating, that I had always been too sensitive, that they had done the best they could. I read her words without anger. I had expected this response. Hoping for something different would have been foolish. I typed a brief reply. "I understand. Take care. I never heard from them again. And you know what? That was okay. Forgiveness. I learned does not mean allowing people to keep hurting you. It means releasing the anger and resentment so they no longer control your peace. I forgave my parents not for their sake, but for mine. I let go of the fantasy that they would someday wake up and realize what they had lost. Some relationships cannot be repaired. Some people are not capable of the growth required to make things right. Accepting this is not defeat, it is freedom. Today, I am in a place I never imagined possible. The app has been downloaded over 100,000 times. I speak regularly at events about accessible technology and the importance of designing for everyone. I have a community of friends who know my story and love me anyway. I have a career that aligns with my values and makes a real difference in the world. And I have my grandmother's necklace, which I wear every single day. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who see you the least. And that is okay, because somewhere out there, someone will see you for exactly who you are. For me, it was my grandmother. And now it is the people I have chosen to call family. Blood made us relatives, but love, real love, that is something you have to earn. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever worked hard for recognition that never came, if you have ever wondered whether you were worthy of love, I want you to know something. You are. You always have been. The people who cannot see that are limited by their own blindness, not by any lack in you. Build your life anyway. Chase your dreams anyway. Become the person you were meant to be anyway. And when you make it, when you finally stand in the light you created for yourself, you will realize something beautiful. You never needed their permission to shine. So now I want to ask you, have you ever faced a situation where your family overlooked you? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and your experience might help someone else who is going through the same thing. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story. And remember, no matter where you came from, you have the power to decide where you are going. Thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for listening. I wish you courage on your own journey, the strength to value yourself even when others do not, and the wisdom to know that your worth was never up for debate. Take care of yourselves, and never forget someone out there sees you.